So this is about the next steps. Just real quick about the Adoptees United. We're a national nonprofit tax exempt organization. All the contributions to Adoptees United are tax deductible. So this will be one of those things that we will be requesting money from people along the way. It doesn't mean you, but it could be trying to raise money within the adoptee rights community or the adoptee community itself. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing anyone in the chat or in the waiting room. All right. All right. This is our board. We've got a really diverse board. We're very proud of it. We strive for what we call diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and that's a core part of what we do. So I'll do a really quick overview of just to give a context of what we're trying to do, because it's really important to understand how Wikipedia works. And I did this before in the video, but I'll do it again really quick. You can't just sort of write whatever you want on Wikipedia. They have editors who work to delete anything that you write that doesn't fit within their parameters. And what that means is that the content has to be neutral, it has to be verified, and it has to be published. So if you're trying to, you can't create new theories unless there's publications out there that support that. So neutral, meaning that articles must not take sides, should explain the sides fairly and without editorial bias. Now, that's a very interesting point, because I think we all know that there is a bias depending upon the community you're in. And so that's part of what we're trying to do with the Wikipedia entries, is to lessen the thumb on the scale that's generally not been contextually correct for adopted people. So if that's our bias, that we come from that context. And so hopefully we're going to add more context that doesn't have bias within it, because that context is based upon our experiences, and we know that the research is out there or information is out there that would support the positions we put in to the articles. Whoops. It has to be verified. Again, it's just not made up. This means that it has to be attributable to published sources that are reliable, and no original research. So, if I have original research, but I can't cite to myself. One, they consider that a conflict of interest, and they would probably delete that from your editing of the content. It also must be a notable topic. So you can't just add an entry to Wikipedia without it being what it calls notable. It has to have evidence from reliable and independent sources, essentially, to add it. And I have the links in the presentation as to if you want to dive more into what they mean by notability. We've already collected, I think it's about 120 different articles that people have submitted that they've identified as articles that either need more context, or sometimes it doesn't exist, and maybe it'd be a good idea to put that into Wikipedia. There's one example on the screen you see is Bethany Christian Services does not have, as far as we can tell, any entry in Wikipedia. That would be interesting to add them and do it in a fair and neutral way. Oops. And I'll go over this in a little bit more detail as we move forward. There's now a form on Adoptees United website where you can pick from all of these articles the one you really are interested in taking on. And that could be you want to take it on the next couple of months, or maybe it's a larger one you're going to work towards, maybe with a team, to launch the editathon in November that we're planning. And so either one of those is fine, because along the way we're going to have some of these sort of small editathons on some of the smaller articles that may need context or a correction. And so feel free to pick one or two or three. And then if other people pick the same article, that becomes a nice way to form a team, and hopefully people can be really collaborative and work together on some of these entries. And so that's what that form is going to be, is you're going to be able to pick from all of those. And then it doesn't mean you're assigned to it, but it means that you're interested in doing that, and we'll just move forward as if you want to do it. There are resources for to understand all this, and Wikipedia actually has a really great. I'm not going to try to reinvent the resources they already have, and I'll put these links in the chat and also in the follow-up to this event. One is a really great way of giving you an overview on how you can either do the source editor or the visual editor. And for most people, I bet the visual editor be much easier to use. It's like a word processor. But they have all sorts of different resources so that you can understand how to do it. And that'll go out in the resources as well, in the follow-up. This is a similar resource if you want to be an editor, and what you can do and what you have to do that. So that's where we're at. And again, these are resources that will come out pretty quickly after this event or this presentation tonight. Let me stop sharing my screen. Well, actually, let's do this. Let's go to the forms just so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is the database entries. You can still see my screen, I assume. Yep. And they're a link. If you want to add something to the database, you can just click on that, and you can add. And there's instructions on what you want to add to our database. If you have articles that you think that should be corrected or adding more context. I'll go back. And so that's the article database that's our database. That's not Wikipedia's. And then the next link that I'll send out in the chat, and as well as with follow-up, is selecting an article from that database or list of articles that we've already created. So you put in your name and your email, and then we have the entire, I forget how many, but as I look through this, I could pick probably more than a dozen of these that I would love to at least look at and figure out what needs to be done. Like I would totally do adult adoption. I'm really interested in that right now. Again, some of these are huge, like adoption in the United States. That would be if you wanted to essentially take a look at what's in that large article and determine what needs to be corrected or what needs additional better context. I've actually edited that portion of that article before on the issue of original birth certificates. But there's all sorts of things. And again, if you don't see anything in here, you can go back to the link up here and request that you be able to work on that specific article. And then at the end is if you want to lead a team, if you're interested in doing that, you can. If you're interested in editing articles, and you just want to limit it to that, you could just pick that. Or maybe it's researching and you just want to be sort of the background and doing research or providing research that you may already have to people who are working on an article, or you can do any combination of the above. And some, I think it'd be nice if you had a team on certain articles, and for others, you may be both the team leader, the editor, and the researcher, because it's doable with one person. And then there's an other, because I have no idea what other people may think about. So I just left that in there as well. And then submit that. And then I should be getting back to you within a week to confirm, and also possibly connect you with other adoptees who are interested in the same article. But again, you can go to, if you want to add a different article that's not on that list, you can do so. And I think I've changed that so that you want to work. You can specifically say, I want to work on this one. Oh, Dale in the comments says you aren't locked into using either the visual editor or the source editor. That's true. You can switch. I actually like the source editor because I'm used to that. I'm kind of geeky and I know HTML really well. It's not HTML, but it has a familiar way to do things with the source editor. Actually, I've never used the visual editor. And some of these, we'll have little, and I'll turn off the screen now. We'll have sort of mini trainings. So I'm not going to claim that everyone will know how to edit right off the bat. You might run into issues. You may not fully understand it. So we will have some mini trainings on, essentially we'll take an article that someone is either working on or is interested in, or one of I might be interested in or working on it, and we'll show you how you would edit in both the source editor and the visual editor. And so we'll have one of those in the next month or so. And then in the chat, let me put some of these links. Hold on. I have it over here. Oops. There we go. So here's the learn to edit. And then an introduction to contributing to Wikipedia. These are really good resources. And again, these will go out with the follow-up as well. The selection, or it's both used for selecting an article you're interested in, but also forming teams around certain articles if there's matches. And then here's where you can view the current database that volunteers have created as something that they would be interested in working on. So with that said, and with follow-up to come, are there questions that you have? And I'm assuming you do have questions.
Well, I'm hoping my microphone is actually working now.
It is.
Are we going to have a database of reference articles and other publications that we can cite? Because we're obviously going to want to cite various references across multiple pages.
Right. That's a great question. My inclination is to say yes, but my hesitation is the resources that would be needed for that. And so my thought would be, those who say they want to be a researcher would share the research that they are working on and share that in a central database. And again, that'll be a really useful database in the end. And I think I've talked about this with others before. Those who have large bibliographies, it would be really useful if that person's available to share that. And so the answer is yes, with the caveat that we're all volunteers, and so we're going to have to try to figure out how to make that database and available. But I don't see it as a hard thing to do. It's going to be convincing people to contribute to the database.
Mm-hmm. I've got a couple of thoughts about how we might coordinate the efforts on that. I can take that offline with you, and
that'd be great.
If you thought it would work.
Yeah, and I love anyone who wants to step up and who says, "Well, I'm interested in doing this," and because I really do see this as a very collaborative process, not only in who's working on it, but how we all work together, and I think it will grow as well.
Okay.
And the idea too, again, this process is a long process to get to November, where we'll have maybe several days and hopefully have people across the globe that are doing the same thing. Not the same article, but doing the same editathon on articles that they've been working on or have been preparing for. The one thing you have to be prepared for a little bit is, and we'll talk about this as it goes along, the editors, the people who watch these pages on Wikipedia, can be pretty brutal sometimes, and they'll just reject your edits outright. So it's just a learning process to figure out what they're looking for, and in some ways how to phrase it and how to cite to it. Yeah. So that's part of the whole process as well. That it would be great as a team, or we could just connect. Whether through Zoom or some other other way to talk about problems that come up, and when you're trying to edit an article on Wikipedia. I'm also considering using Slack as a way to communicate on this. It's a pretty large project, and I think it'd be really good to have a central communication hub for all these things. Slack isn't for everybody, but I can say that in the New England Adoptee Rights Coalition, that with Ellie and Becca, we've been using it pretty well in communicating about legislation. It's not. I mean, I don't think there's a perfect communication platform out there. Slack is pretty good. Facebook is terrible. Twitter's even worse for communication through Teams. So unless you want to pay for it, it's project management, but even then, Slack will do the job. So that's something to look at. Adoptees United already has a Slack account. It's likely we would just have different channels for different things, and one would be Wikipedia, one could be research, and one could be just general discussion. So we'll have to figure that out as we move forward. Any other questions?
Question. Have you had trouble with folks' edits getting rejected because of their proximity to the issue in the past?
Yes, that's me.
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky. So when I first signed up for an account on Wikipedia, and you have to do that to be to edit anything, you have to create an account. I signed up as Adoptee Rights. That was my username, and everything got rejected that I wrote about for adoption. Everything. Well, it didn't help that I was actually putting links into Adoptee Rights Law Center as well. So that's a no-no, not to link back to your own work or your own website, things like that. So that was fine. So then I changed my name, my handle. I got a new account, and I haven't had any trouble at all. Because, when you're citing back to things that are reliable, have been published and have been available for a long time, or reasonably long time, then they really can't reject you. They may. I mean, it's just, I think that's the issue with Wikipedia. It's just this massive number of people, some of whom are editors, and they may reject it for reasons you don't fully understand. So that's something to watch out for. Yeah. I would not sign up as your handle is, end adoption or or adoptee rights forever or anything like that. I ended up choosing once was Brian, so because my name when I was born was Brian. So you may see once was Brian on some of the articles with adoption, including, then I could cite to the Adoptee Rights Law Center because I had really good information about original birth certificates. So I wasn't being, well, maybe I was a little selfish, but I thought that was a really good source for people to understand the issue. But yeah,
hey, Greg.
Yeah.
Just Linnell. Just wondering, can you advertise in ICAV? Because I'd love to get some intercountry adoptees kind of focused on the intercountry adoption part.
Totally.
And I think it's gone off the radar for a lot of people. So
yeah. I agree, because we started this in November, and we are 2 months.
And there hasn't been anything really publicly kind of shared about it. So that's why I didn't realize you're already up to this stage already, even myself. So and I'm sure there'll be some people, some adoptees who'd be interested in this, particularly intercountries. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, what's interesting is there was a Swedish adopted person who wants to create an adoption in Sweden article, which is huge. I mean, that's a big article. So I need to follow up with a lot of people, but also, yes, I will advertise in ICAV as well. I say we're 2 months behind. It just, we're still going to get it done. It's just that where we are right now, meaning trying to form teams and trying to do some trainings, we should have been there in, I think, February. But that's just how, I was really busy with legislation, and it's all volunteer driven, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Stuff in adoption land never goes fast.
No. Yeah, which I'm glad that we put this out for November, because I think we'll get there, especially after legislative season's over, and then I'm bored. I'm not. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
I've got a question going back to the edit wars and such. When it comes to language, is there already like kind of like some agreed upon style guide of sorts when it comes to like, are we all editing articles to have everything in line with positive adoption language versus honest adoption language versus like there's all different lexicons that
I think that would actually be
don't even agree on when it comes to like, do we use birth parents or original parents, or like, is there an agreed upon style guide for that, like reasoning for just common terminology to agree on?
That's a really, really good question. That would be an internal style guide for us, more than anything, right? And I think that as you raise that, I think that is something we need to tackle as part of the project, especially for November. Yeah, I think that we're going to have trouble getting agreement on all terms, as we all know.
Yeah, and it's not going to be 100% satisfactory to everyone.
But it could be where you say we prefer the use of, I'll just use an example. We prefer the use of birth parent without a space, which is what I do. Yeah. But other acceptable terms are natural mother, or first mother, whatever we agree on as a style guide. Yeah, but that would be, and I could see the real benefit of creating that itself for the adoptee rights movement as a whole, to have a style guide that applies to communications. So that's a great question, and something that I think would be great to grow out of this as well. Yeah, are you volunteering to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Really? That would be awesome.
Yeah, I know. And I know Mary, my sister Mary, has been really interested in working on style, like a style guide that to be passed around to journalists, and to kind of replace positive adoption language. Let's have something adoptee crafted that that's inclusive and represents the more balanced perspective than what typically gets published and recommended.
And I'll have to look to see if there's an article on Wikipedia specifically about positive adoption language, because that would be something that would be really useful to add more context. I think there is. There may be within adoption in the United States.
I remember seeing something about it, and I remember seeing that there was even a section on criticisms of adoption language.
Yeah. Right. I think it would be good. It would be good to be able to, like, in addition to a style guide, just like for internal consistency. I feel like it could be good to maybe find some kind of whatever we agree on for like the terms we're using for birth parents versus adoptive parents versus adoptees and all that stuff. Having some kind of source that we can link to kind of justify, like, this is why I made this choice to, like, when our edits get challenged, this is why I changed this terminology to match this, and here's that I have to back it up to justify the edit that I just made that you tried to revert. And,
so I think it's a great idea.
Editors
and what I love about that idea is that it transcends this project as well. Dana, go ahead. Yeah, so I've got you down as volunteering. Yeah,
great.
I'm actually really interested in it too, so I'd certainly help out and help with structure, and not structure of structuring the document, but if you need logistical support to pull it off. So all right, Dana, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to continue upon this conversation around language. I think it's really important, in recognizing that as adopted folks were not a monolith. And so I am a bit hesitant to put out a like particular style guide that would be used for like all adoptees. You know, we all have very different experiences. So, and I think in addition to that, I think there's a way of presenting language that recognizes these differences, but also is human-centered and is centered around the adoptee experience versus adoptive parents, for instance, or the adoptive agency. So I think, but also recognizing that like language evolves. So how I might refer to myself, you know, maybe yesterday was adoptee and today it's an adopted person, right? So I think that it's just important to recognize that too.
I agree. I think that's a great point. I mean, I'm an example of I use adoptee for years, and now I'm almost always using adopted person. And you know, this is going to be a completely adoptee-centered style guide, or whatever we want to call it. So I think it's a legitimate concern to worry about language that is more centered on adoptive parents or the industry as a whole. But this is centered on adopted people. But even within that, you're right. We're not a monolith, and so I think we also have to be cognizant of all the differences we have. As you know, whether it's large differences like intercountry adoptees versus domestic, or smaller differences like if you're born and adopted from Chile versus born and adopted from South Korea.
And in fact, that brings up an article that I doubt exists on Wikipedia that is desperately needed, is an article describing the different types of adoptions, because there's literally nobody better equipped to write that than a group of adoptees.
Right. I don't think there's a separate topic for instance, for plenary adoption. I don't think there's actually an article that discusses plenary adoption. So that's a good, so that's a obviously
nor
good
one that
example.
discusses simple.
Right. Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's within the Australian context or other countries that use those terms. But yeah. Well, I'm excited. You know, and I expected a small group tonight. But I figured it would be the people who are really interested in it and would end up being fairly dedicated to it. But I think as people start to see what we're really trying to do, because I think people aren't quite understanding what this will do, you'll get a lot more interest. And then also recruit others in your own communities to help you out, because that would be a really good way for them to get engaged and involved in this issue. You know, they don't have to go through Adoptees United. You could just, you know, it's a friend who's an adopted person who's interested in helping you out. So consider that as well. All right, I think I am. Oh, there is yep, Jim just, there is a plenary adoption article. Yeah. Interesting. Unless it's not a category, right? It's not within a category. It's an actual article. Yeah. So, well, good. I'll save this chat, and then also this will go out to everybody who's signed up so far, and I think it's about 150 people. So, you know, it's significant interest. But as with everything, the people who start to do the work is usually pretty small. But I'm excited I know almost all of you. So I'm excited to work with all of you and anyone else who wants to join us. And I'm so glad that Linnell's involved as well, because she brings that intercountry adoption, not only experience, but she's a long time advocate in that space and knows so many people. So thanks, Linnell. All right, I think we're done. Thanks, everybody. It's one of these short ones, which I'm happy for. And Kim, now you can get to study for your finals.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch.